The first one is from Moravia, or maybe I should start saying RWS Moravia, but for me Moravia will be always Moravia, my birthplace, where I gained most of my localization experience. So this article is about 5 localization pitfalls and how to avoid them. Pitfall number 1, templatizing too much. So templates can help speed up the process of building web pages, emails, documents, product descriptions, even blog posts without you having to reinvent the wheel. The issue is that it might be that your template doesn't work across regions. For example, a web page for China would have to look vastly different from what we're used to in the West in terms of UX preferences. I think I mentioned this on one of the earlier episodes when I was talking about my experience with my Thai friend, and at that time she was setting up her own kind of like a store or like a website about what she was selling, which I think was like collagen, I don't know how you pronounce it. And when I saw the website, I was like, what the fuck is this? Like it has like all these flashing fonts, graphics, and it really looked crazy, and I think I'm like exposed to a lot of, startup websites that have like this clean, minimalistic one-page landing page. And I really like a simple, clean design. And she actually told me that that's the way how Thai people like it. And I think maybe in China it might be the same. So I think this is what they were referring to. Another thing that comes to my mind is templatizing too much. It could also be related to templates that you use for communication. For example, like when you have templates for sending handoffs or something like that, is that some people maybe just used to just like changing the like filling the blanks, the parts that need to be adjusted in the template, but they kind of like cannot think like outside of the box, so they're just bound to the template, and they don't know like how the template was created. They're just like living and executing the project within a template, and that might be a sign that they're not that experienced yet. Anyway, let's continue with the article. In cases where content preferences change drastically, as in the example above, you might have to develop different web page templates for different regions. This takes time, of course. Perhaps start lean and create templates for just your biggest revenue generating markets. So, templates for different regions, that sounds good, as long as the regions have like a similar specifics when it comes to the templates. So the question is whether you could templatize certain region or not. And start lean, again, I think this is a concept that I'm promoting and highlighting like almost on every episode, experiment. And I know that Moravia, at least based on the earlier articles that I was sharing from them on this podcast, they also kind of like follow that approach of experimenting and testing and evaluating and changing. So yeah, in other cases, it will be sufficient to do some tweaks to your global website template once you've used it. At least make sure your master template is localization ready by making it as simple and organized as possible. For example, simplify formatting. Beyond basic formatting like colors, bolding, italics, and lists, things like images and tables can be difficult to duplicate in translated files. Leave white space. This helps preserve the content's formatting when translated. Most languages take up more space than English and need room to grow. Choose a basic Unicode font, like Arial or Times New Roman. Not all fonts can support accents, umlauts, and other special characters. So my comment regarding this final part of the templates is, it's kind of like, seems to me like the internationalization rules or like suggestions when it comes to software. So leave white space, use a font that's like Unicode, simplify formatting. Well, maybe that's not much about UI, but anyway, well, if you think about it, like a template still kind of looks like a piece of software. Maybe, like, if you have a wild imagination, it's still like a pieces, like that some things stay fixed, some things you need to change. You need to think about design and like who will enter what where. So yeah, technically it's not that different from like a UI form. Anyway, pitfall number 2, neglecting and nurture campaigns. If you think holistically about customer journeys and the nurture programs you build around your home turf content, then you need to think holistically about localization too. That means you mustn't neglect other global digital marketing elements like email campaigns, landing pages, social posts, and so on. These need to be localized just as thoughtfully as your content. By optimizing nurture campaigns for different regions, you can get more mileage out of your hero content. Once you've built all the components, for example, an email sequence driving customers to download an ebook, or follow-up content for after they attend a webinar, you would simply replicate and localize the campaign for each market. The marketing funnel itself doesn't need to differ, just the language and culturally aware delivery of each piece. As part of that, you would also need to think about suitable ways to localize each piece with quality and budget considerations in mind. A simple post download thank you page might not need more than machine translation, but the landing page leading to it would need human-generated content, perhaps transcreation, to drive users emotionally to act. So, of course, I agree with this because like just translating like a content doesn't mean that that's everything that you provide for like English customers, right? So you need to drive them to the content first, then you need to make them to stay and stuff like that. So this kind of like reminds me of the previous episode where we talk about the translation without source text, where it was actually reversed. So in that article, the emphasis was on basically not transcreating, but by recreating or basically writing the marketing copy from scratch, not based on a source text. So the emphasis was actually put on things like landing pages, email campaigns, social posts, and so on. And so my main comment and my main problem with that article last week was that if you spend so much time and so much budget on these marketing or campaigns to drive people to convert, then do you still have enough budget to make the rest of their experience as awesome as the marketing or the conversion process was? So this article from Moravia talks about the different thing is that like once you have like a great content, you also should not forget about your campaigns. And I really agree that when they're saying like holistically, like thinking holistically about the customer journey and how to nurture your clients, you basically need to think about the whole journey and the whole nurturing process for your customers in different regions, which basically means back to localization. So yeah, Pitfall number 3, ignoring the variation within a single language. Take Spanish as an example. There are many variations and dialects of Spanish even within Spanish-speaking regions. Latin America alone is a melting pot of cultures that each takes its own linguistic influence from different indigenous and European languages. Some Spanish-speaking countries also speak other languages entirely, Catalan in Spain, for example. So, do your research. The first step is to find out which dialects or variants you might need to cater to. The next is to figure out whether to cater to them. As a general rule of thumb, the less creative or country-specific your content, the more you can get away with using the universal version of your target language. For marketing or highly branded content, a one-size-fits-all approach is too risky. You'll want to recognize your customers' dialect nuances to connect with them on a deeper level. So everyone who's kind of like experienced in localization probably knows there are different variations, Spanish being one example, Portuguese being another example. We also have French in France, French in Canada, maybe French in Switzerland. So this shouldn't be a new thing. What I really like here that they say the less creative or country-specific your content, the more you can get away with using the universal version of your target language. So yeah, the more your English is generic, the less you probably need to adapt it to different regions. And I also like the fact that they're saying, where was this? Oh, it's actually not even written here, so I guess that's just like my thought. And I know we mentioned this on earlier episodes, is that you should always consider the ROI. So it might be nice if you localize your website to Catalan, but what if the people in Barcelona are not interested like in your product at all, or they can't afford it, or whatever. Okay, pitfall number 4, being too rigid with technology. The risk is that you put too much faith and money in tech only to find later on that it's starting to crack under pressure. What if the translation management system you've relied on for years doesn't integrate with the company's new CMS? Instead, you should be thinking about your technology needs today and how they might develop with your localization program and wider business objectives. In other words, if you have to rely on tools, at least make sure they can scale. So this point is kind of, I don't know, meh for me. Because like if you, well actually it might make sense, because like not a long time ago I had this experience with like a new TMS tool that was presented to me, and even though it's called TMS, like it couldn't even handle the management of TMs in the cloud. So you would have to manually update the TMs offline and then just upload them back to the TMS. So it was like a very backwards. But I think like if you're like using the main market leaders, like they want to stay in the business, they want to be competitive. So if I think there's like a huge chance that they will be improving their tools in the future, and like if you have like a new CMS, as long as like many of their customers actually have that need, then it's probably very safe to assume that they will make it possible to integrate with your TMS. But yeah, like based on my experience with that one TMS that I just mentioned that doesn't even handle the management of TMs, I wouldn't be surprised that if by any chance like you go for some like low tech TMS solution that doesn't offer much, then you might you might take a risk in the future. Anyway, number 5, the last pitfall is treating localization as a one-off task. If you're a small business with very little content to localize, you could maybe possibly get away with an ad hoc approach to localization. That is, outsourcing one job to a vendor rather than having someone build you a program-level approach with tools, quality processes, and KPIs. But if you're a brand operating at scale, that's a recipe for disaster. You need a smarter, more strategic approach if you don't want to fall into the pitfalls we've covered here. It might seem far-fetched to be able to release global content proactively, but it's absolutely possible when you take a holistic approach to localization. And holistic is highlighted here. So, yeah, I think this is mainly for like new companies, new buyers that don't have much experience with localization, or they just don't understand the needs and the benefits that localization brings. I'm actually trying to think like who would be like one-time customer for localization. I know that when I used to work in Skrivanek, that's where we were. Not me, because I was the only person in the localization department. But Skrivanek actually, they're actually quite big. But what was surprising to me was that I think a lot of their business actually comes from people asking for like a standard translation. Like immigrants coming to Czech Republic who just need their, passport translated for legal purposes. So that might be like one-off thing. I don't know, like if you think about, maybe just like my whole life currently is like driven by these like global apps and global products and solutions. Like whether you're ordering food, buying clothes, everything is like a global brand right now. So of course these companies rely on localization to drive the revenues in different markets. So of course for them it's not a one-off task. So yeah, I think I'm just talking too much about nothing. So I think I'm going to end it for this article right here.